Good evening, everyone. I hope you're doing very well. Today, I would like to share with you a really delicious fanfic written by Nimish, who graciously allowed me to record this for you all. I read this fanfiction one night before I was going to sleep, and it was absolutely the perfect thing to help me calm down and cheer up before going to bed. It's in the Fantastic Beasts universe, set right after the crimes of Grindelwald, so obviously not canon yet, but I certainly hope it will be. About Newt, Jacob, Queenie, Tina, and Lita. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. This is After Hours by Nimish. Sometime after everything is concluded, as concluded as it can be for now, Newt is ushered out of his brother's office to wait for him to finish making up his reports. It's nearly 3 in the morning. The ministry is about as empty as it ever gets, and unnervingly quiet, and Newt has a throbbing headache and is desperately tired. Though he's been back from Paris for only a few hours, the events that transpired there feel like they took place days ago already. The sight he's greeted with in the hallway outside of Theseus's office suggests that Tina, Queenie, Lita, and Jacob feel rather similarly. Jacob is sound asleep on a bench with his head in Queenie's lap, one shoe hanging from the tips of his toes. Queenie's half wilted over him, her eyes drifting shut. Tina's on the floor amongst a stack of her own paperwork, filling it in about as enthusiastically as a prisoner picking out the means of their own execution. Lita's pacing in a way that's startlingly reminiscent of Theseus, the clipping of her heels the only percussive interruption of the sound of Jacob snoring and the scrape of Tina's quill on parchment. Newt sinks back against the closed door behind him. Good evening, everyone. Technically, Tina checks her watch. It's good morning. Queenie makes a low, pained sound in the back of her throat. Newt feels his skull contract in sympathy. Lita casts him a helpless look. Isn't there tea somewhere around here? He asks after a moment's hesitation. Kitchens? Kitchens? Jacob abruptly sits up, apparently less sleepy than he had initially appeared. With, food? And coffee. Tina also suddenly looks very awake. Coffee, Queenie blinks. Oh my God, I would die. Kitchens, yes, Lita nods. And I believe they have coffee. They're on the floor above. Shall we? Yes. Queenie scrambles up, scattering papers everywhere, knocking over her inkwell in the process. Pool of scarlet ink leaking across the floor and staining the ankle of her stocking. Oh no. Oh honey, Queenie sighs and gets up to help her. No, I got it. Tina waves her off, giving her wand a practiced flick. The papers all obediently pile themselves back into the right order, though she can't quite get the ink stain off her stocking. I'll soak it for you later. Queenie pats her on the elbow affectionately. Tina has flushed a little, and it abruptly occurs to Newt that she's embarrassed, that she's just made a clumsy mess of herself in front of Newt and the relative stranger she has, however needlessly, been assuming he was engaged to until quite recently. He realizes he should not be staring at her, that being stared at often makes people more self-conscious, not less so. so he carefully averts his gaze, however much he likes the way the dim lights of the hallway cast the shadows of her eyelashes down her cheeks, give her dark eyes a soft sort of glow, her fine, delicate fingers deft as she slips her wand back into her sleeve. Staring is not polite. How many times as a boy did his mother chide him about such things? And Theseus after her. This way, Lita beckons them, clip, clip, clipping as she goes. Newt is seized with an odd, time out of time sort of feeling. Perhaps because of the odd hour, the length of the day that is still somehow dragging on and on and on. They're walking the halls of the ministry in that sort of listless way that he sometimes wondered the halls at Hogwarts with Lita late at night, sneaking into the kitchens to talk to the house elves and pilfer biscuits or make cheese on toast, chatting up the paintings that wouldn't tell on them, avoiding Jeeves. But the ministry halls don't feel anything like as kind and friendly as the halls of Hogwarts did, and the woman that walks beside Newt is no longer his best friend. The kitchens are cavernous, of course. There's a pantry the size of a bedroom in the back, 3 long empty tables reaching from end to end of the room, shelves upon shelves of crockery and silverware, one wall lined with cupboards containing goodness knows what, another containing only 5 deep, stone sinks, and a wine rack stretching from floor to ceiling. And there is a small army of house elves sleeping in hammocks in the rafters. As far as Newt knows, the ministry has several kitchens, and this is likely one of the smaller ones. He still sees it take Jacob, Queenie, and Tina by surprise. Nothing much like this in Makusa, evidently. Oh, don't trouble yourselves. He glances up at the telltale rustle of a number of house elves rousing themselves. We can provide for our own needs. Please, stay in bed. He sees a small face peering suspiciously at him from the shadows above, but none of them come down. Tea? Lita has opened a cupboard over a deep stone sink, and I believe there's coffee somewhere. Please. Queenie flops into the nearest chair. My head's gonna fall off if I don't get some caffeine. Jacob, honey, please stop thinking about food. I'm starving. Sorry. Jacob squeezes her shoulders affectionately. We have at least enough bread for you to make toast, if you'd like, Lita offers. And yes, Theseus has hidden the good biscuits again. Let me see. She begins rummaging amongst a set of tins. Newt snorts. Theseus used to hide sweets and biscuits from him when they were boys, too. Apparently, this habit has now extended to his adult colleagues. He investigates the coffee. The jar looks respectable enough, and sets a kettle on the nearest stove to boil, sensing that if his American compatriots don't get some soon, they really will all wither into dust at the slightest provocation. Tina is laying out her paperwork on the end of one of the tables, apparently determined to finish it still, though, after a moment's hesitation, she also kicks off her shoes and ink-stained stockings, grimacing as she examines them. You got any stuff for actual baking round here? Jacob is curiously investigating a pantry, nomad style. Only I got a hankering for pie. Oh, pie, Queenie sighs, collapsing over a work surface with such a look of anguished longing Newt feels genuinely sorry for her. Yeah, I could whip something up, Jacob shrugs. You want pumpkin pie, sweetie? Or rhubarb? Pumpkin, Queenie nods decisively. I'm sure the ingredients can't be that hard to come by around here. Newt scurries to help Jacob search, The ministry has all sorts. Out of the corner of his eye, he can see Tina filling one of the sinks with soapy water and dropping her stockings in to soak. He tries not to stare. Truly he does, and certainly he glances away the moment she looks up. The nape of her neck continues to be distracting, even as he tries to help Jacob fetch flour down from a particularly high shelf. Aha! Lita holds up a packet of chocolate digestives triumphantly. Something to tide you over a little, at least. Don't tell Theseus I know where he keeps them. She tosses the packet to Tina, who catches them with a wry smile. The Americans have never had digestive biscuits before, let alone chocolate ones, but they meet with immediate enthusiastic approval from Jacob, who delightedly begins trying to pick apart what they're made of, and from Queenie, who only seems happy to have something sweet to eat. Tina munches quietly. She has gone back to her paperwork, barefoot, winding her ankles around the legs of her chair like a child would. The coffee, however, meets with immediate disgust from everyone. "What?" Newt asks, perturbed by their expressions. "That," Tina intones emphatically, "is not coffee." "Ugh, no." Jacob thrusts his mug away from him. "Is that what wizard coffee tastes like?" "No." Queenie looks offended by the very idea. "Apparently, it's what British coffee tastes like." Tina shakes her head. "You got all this magical stuff in here, and you can't come up with a decent cup of joe?" Jacob raises his eyebrows incredulously. "I can fix this." Queenie jumps up. "I make the best coffee in the whole of Makusa. Show me your beans. And I need eggs, butter, sugar, and pumpkin, and more butter. Lots of butter." Jacob disappears back into the pantry. "I need pie to get the taste of whatever the hell that not coffee is out of my mouth." Queenie officially declares the ministry's coffee beans to be older than Merlin's beard, and begins trying to coax them back to freshness with a series of small, delicate spells Newt has never heard before. He is, once again, reminded never to underestimate Queenie Goldstein. Her magic lacks the explosive strength he's seen in Tina's, or the book-learned precision of Lita's. But there's an instinctive artistry, something fine, almost ornate, to the way Queenie wields power. She's no less skillful than any of her friends, just in ways that are subtler and more tricksy than he's used to. Jacob collects another bag of flour, a jar of sugar, 2 blocks of butter, and crows delightedly when he finds a stack of large, fresh pumpkins in the back of the pantry. "Who stockpiles these things?" he asks, hauling out the best-looking of them. "Pumpkin pasties are popular amongst ministry staff," Lita puts in. She is perched on the nearest table, legs delicately crossed, finishing off the chocolate digestives. "Do you not have them in America?" "No, but now I want to try 'em." Jacob sets the pumpkin down with a grin. "One thing at a time, though, I guess. Someone want to help me carve this up?" Queenie makes a deft gesture with her wand, and the pumpkin falls apart into neat segments, seeds, and entrails spinning up into the air out of the way. She winks at Jacob as she does it, and Jacob goes extremely pink. "I'll take those." Newt guides the seeds back down into a bowl. The Nifflers are rather fond of the seeds. "You know, I mostly prefer my own way of baking." Jacob is already measuring flour and butter into a bowl, still pink. "But I'm never going to miss having to cut up a pumpkin the hard way." Queenie ruffles his hair, and Jacob's blush deepens. He seasons the pumpkin and puts it into an oven to roast. As he works, The kitchen begins to smell like cinnamon and nutmeg. He sprinkles more of both into the sugar he uses, works the butter and flours together with his fingers, his sleeves rolled up past his elbows, whistling. Here, then, is Jacob's own sort of magic. Newt pauses to admire his friend as he pulls raw, soft pastry dough together as deftly as any wizard could do with a wand, confident, masterful, artful, like Queenie. His movements are part instinct, part pleasure, part practice. He's tired and raw after days of exhaustive stress, but he's home anywhere that there's a kitchen and dough to be worked. Queenie is humming to whatever Jacob's whistling. It's a Muggle tune, Newt realizes. He's heard it before, somewhere in America. Jacob had mentioned it about something, music halls, and vaudeville being amongst his favorite distractions from the drudgery of life at the cannery. He knew half a dozen songs by heart. He wonders whether the notes of any Muggle song have ever been heard before in the ministry walls. He wonders if Queenie and Jacob understand how revolutionary they are, a Muggle and a witch, elbow to elbow as they work, putting supper together from magically restored coffee beans and hand-baked pie, singing, flirting, safe and happy. Newt catches Tina's eye across her paperwork and sees her smile. Jacob rolls fresh pastry into a tin and trims off the excess, which Queenie immediately starts nibbling. "There's raw egg in that," Tina chides her, and Queenie only shrugs. "Worth the risk." She offers a piece to Newt, who can't help himself. Even unbaked, it smells delightful, and he's not disappointed. The dough is rich, sweet, and buttery. He resists the urge to ruffle Jacob's hair himself. Lita eats too, somehow making even the consumption of raw pastry seem elegant, and Tina's indignant snort only leads Queenie to offer her the last of it, which she takes, casting her sister a dirty look. "I get some kind of no-match food poisoning from this. I'm not coming to your wedding," she informs Queenie, who only laughs and pouts mockingly. "Don't be so grumpy, teeny Tina." Newt doesn't notice Lita coming to lean against the cupboard next to him until she clears her throat, startling him out of his thoughts. Then she gives him a gentle nudge, glancing pointedly at Tina. "I like her." Tina has gotten up from the table, stretching stiff arms and cracking ink-stained knuckles, her back half turned to them. She yawns and mutters something grumpy under her breath, then pushes her hair out of her eyes with slow, tired fingers, and Newt feels his heart contract. Yes, so do I. Lita is still watching him, then gently takes his elbow, guiding him to an angle that will keep them from being overheard. "Were you planning on acting on that fact at any point in the foreseeable future?" Newt glances at her wide-eyed. Lita's expression is gently mischievous, but not unkind. In what way?" he asks, blinking. Lita rolls her eyes at him. "You know perfectly well in what way." Newt swallows, because he does. Of course he does. He's a grown man. He has at least some general understanding of what is expected of him in these circumstances. But also, he doesn't know it all. A lifetime of handling unpredictable creatures has taught him that there is a vast gulf between an intellectual understanding and a practical grasp of his subject, and he has no practical grasp of any kind with women, except, of course, the one stood next to him. And given that she is now engaged to his brother, he is Not sure that counts in any meaningful way. Lita takes pity on him. Perhaps start with the suggestion of dinner. Ah, Newt has to admit that sounds practical. Yes. He considers Tina again, momentarily. She has returned to the sink, hanging over it as she washes her stockings, her brow drawn in a look of almost comical concentration. The fine plane of her back and the way her fringe is sticking to her forehead are both faintly overwhelming. There are soap bubbles on her nose. He wants, powerfully, to go over there and touch her. He glances nervously at Lita. What would that entail, precisely? Lita snorts, then suddenly draws herself up to the fullness of her 5 feet 3 inches, 4 inches in heels, and puts her head on one side, pulling a face he hasn't seen her make since their school days. She deepens her voice comically and widens her eyes, clasps a dramatic hand to her chest. Oh, dearest Miss Goldstein, I think you're ever so pretty. Would you like to come and eat sandwiches in my suitcase with me? Newt stifles a surprised bubble of laughter. I can't possibly sound like that. You absolutely do. Lita's mouth quirks affectionately. I've had many, many years to perfect my impressions of the Scamander brothers. Newt shakes his head. Do you still do Theseus? I should hope so. Lita's eyes are bright with amusement. The day Theo can't take my making fun is the day we shall have to call off the wedding. Newt tries to picture Theseus politely tolerating Lita's droll sense of humor and uncanny ability to impersonate almost anyone she sets her mind to. At Hogwarts, she could do surprisingly entertaining pastiches of anyone, from nearly headless Nick to Dumbledore. Finds his brain coming up against a discomforting lack of data. Of course, he has spent so long avoiding them. He has no real idea of how they truly function as a couple. What dynamic exists privately between them, when one or both of them isn't simply shepherding him while he politely avoids looking either of them in the face. That they do happen to exist outside of his personal angst as two people who love each other in the same deep, true, and comfortable way that Queenie and Jacob love each other is not a thought he's ever let himself dwell on for too long. Too alien and unpleasant. Lita has taken his protracted silence for something other than the troubling contemplation of her relationship with his brother. You really ought to ask her, she tells him sincerely now. She's not going to turn you down. Newt nods, bites at his lip. It won't be that hard, Lita assures him, giving him another gentle nudge. You suggest somewhere pleasant at a decent time. You find yourself a suit that fits, for once, and you bring her flowers and tell her she's pretty, and open doors for her and pull out her chair and such. You really wouldn't have a hard time mastering it, Newt. She's already so endeared to you. You make it sound very simple. Well, it is, with the right person. Newt nods, then glances at her sidelong, steeling himself. If I had asked you to dinner when we were at school, would you have gone? For a moment he's sure he's made her uncomfortable and that she will refuse to answer him, but she only seems to be considering the question. I think we would have. Yes, at one point. I was waiting for you to ask me to the Yule Ball, you know. Newt blinks. The Yule? But you said you hated the whole to-do. Well, That's rather something, one says, when one's a lonely 16-year-old who knows that no one will ever ask her to dance. Lita shrugs delicately. I really thought you would ask me, though. But you never did. No, Newt swallows. He'd agonized over the idea for months. He'd even thought about exactly how he would do it. But then she'd insisted she disliked the pretense of balls and everything associated with them, so they'd skipped it and spent the night revising together in the library instead. I'm afraid I was never very good at that sort of communication back then, or now as it happens. Lita laughs softly, and Newt is seized with the strange fragility of how his life has turned out. But for a nerve ending or two failing him at a key moment at 16, he might have managed to choke out an invitation to her, and she might have accepted, and then where would they be? Would he have ever been expelled, taken up his field of study, left London? Would he have ever met Tina? That idea, more than any, fills him with a strange, slow dread. Tina is hanging up her stockings now, pushing her hair out of her eyes, pleased with herself. Merlin's beard, he can't imagine not knowing her. So strange and stubborn and lovely. Lita seems to be working her way up to saying something, knitting and unknitting her fingers. It's a nervous habit that Newt remembers well. The first time he saw it, they'd both been 11 years old, and the sorting hat had just been placed on her head. I didn't mean to fall in love with him, you know, Lita begins abruptly, her gaze downcast. It simply happened like that, like something natural and unstoppable, like a tide coming in. I couldn't help a minute of it, and I wouldn't change it if I could. But I wish it hadn't cost me your friendship, Newt. Newt bites his lip. It's not as if she owes him any sort of explanation for her own heart, of course. Though something in the delicate admission that he had been hurt, that she understood he'd been hurt, feels like a relief. He can't begrudge her what makes her happy, especially if she feels for Theseus anything like what he feels for Tina. I don't think it's cost you my friendship, he murmurs, looking away, giving her a moment to brush the tears from her eyelashes so that they can both pretend they were never there to begin with. Not really. She squeezes his wrist tightly. Her grip is steadying and familiar. He can feel it and look at Tina and believe Lita when she tells him that Tina won't turn him down, that she is endeared, however desperately difficult it is for him to believe, in his heart of hearts, that anyone should be endeared to him in every way whatsoever. I think things have turned out exactly as they needed to, don't you? Lita asks, softly, following the line of his gaze. Newt nods slowly. Don't wait too long with this one. She gives his wrist another squeeze before letting go. She seems a little less forgiving than I am. Newt stifles a laugh. Jacob is busying himself with the pumpkin, taken from the oven now. He scrapes the heat-softened flesh from its skin into another large bowl, then begins to beat in more cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, ginger, spoonfuls of sticky dark brown sugar, half a carton of cream, and 2 more eggs. The mixture forms a thick batter the color of terracotta, smelling strongly of Halloween and Hogwarts and other childhood things. And 2 more eggs. The mixture forms a thick batter the color of terracotta, smelling strongly of Halloween and Hogwarts and other childhood things. As Newt comes back to the center of the room to observe his friend's handiwork, his stomach begins to rumble. There, Jacob carefully pours the pumpkin mixture into the waiting pastry case. Nearly done. Queenie, honey, you're going to have to help me out if we want to eat before dawn. Want me to bake it for you? Queenie produces her wand again. Just give me a sec. Coffee's nearly done. The coffee also smells rather good. Queenie has freshened the coffee beans, roasted them, ground them, and filtered the resulting fine black powder through a boiling water into a teapot, for lack of a coffee pot, with a series of complicated wordless spells Newt couldn't place. She supposes she must do the same every day during the course of her work at Makusa, and wonders how many other tea witches the world over are wasting their talents on boring men in offices instead of taking over the world the way they so clearly ought to be. Oh, Merlin's beer, that's excellent, Lita murmurs when she tastes it. Don't give this to the ministry officials. Their poor old heads will explode. She's a genius. Jacob squeezes Queenie's arm affectionately, and Newt watches Queenie go pink with pride. Ain't no one works coffee beans like my Queenie. Okay, but you gotta give her sister a cup before you decide to get all mushy. Tina holds out her hand for a mug from the other end of the table. I'm nowhere near caffeinated enough to be able to take you two making eyes at each other all over the kitchen. Only if you put down that quill for a sec. Queenie holds a mug just out of her sister's reach. You gotta take a break. I'm nearly done. So you'll be nearly done in the morning, Queenie shrugs. You're gonna work yourself into an early grave, Teeny, I swear. Put the quill down. Come sit over here. Have some supper like a civilized witch. Tina grimaces, but Newt can see she's already given in by the slack that hits her shoulders, the exhaustion bruising her eyes. Fine. Queenie begins to set the pie baking with a spell as her sister comes to join them at the other side of the table, sliding into a chair next to Newt. You know, given that it's coming up on 4 in the morning, she remarks, still sounding grumpy, though gently, almost affectionately so. If this is anything, it's breakfast, not supper. I don't care what we call it, so long as we get to eat, Queenie quips, setting the pie down. Freshly baked, it smells like autumn and ancient rites and recent victories, like home, like friendship. Newt sips appreciatively from his coffee mug as Jacob slices up the pie, and Lita joins him on Newt's other side. Tina leans back, reflexively, automatically, waving plates off the nearest shelf, cutlery out of a drawer, setting the table just exactly as Newt suspects she always does at home. He tries and fails not to stare, though she doesn't seem to mind. They are still eating when Theseus arrives, rubbing his eyes, yawning widely, and demanding to know what in the ruddy hell smells so good.